Illinois lawmakers have 1 week to go before their scheduled adjournment on May 31st. Welcome to another edition of Illinois Lawmakers. I'm Jack Titchener, along with Hannah Meisel of the Daily Line. Hannah, the graduated income tax is now up. It's ready for a floor vote here in the House. What are we hearing about whether it's going to make that magic 71 vote supermajority?
Well, Democrats seem very confident that they have the votes, or at least for the amendment. But the rates, which got fewer votes in the Senate, are a whole nother situation. A couple of weeks ago, we saw the House Progressive Caucus come out against throwing out the estate tax, which is a 40% tax on people who die with $4 million worth of assets or more. So that was a major component of a Senate compromise that got the rates over the line. But again, the governor has campaigned on a progressive income tax for 2 years. He's pushed hard at every single corner, every single juncture he can to relate anything back about the state's problems to the progressive income tax. It would look awfully silly if at least the constitutional amendment was pushed off for the summer or fall.
But the actual bracketology, if you will, could follow in a trailer bill later on in this session or next session.
It could. And, I think members had initially wanted assurances about the rates before they voted on an amendment. But as time went on, as people got crunched, as more and more pressure began to build, I think that lawmakers might be willing to wait on those.
We're also, of course, lawmakers are reacting this week to the Friday afternoon surprise of a new Capitol bill proposal from the governor's office. It's a bit different than what emerged from the Senate Transportation and the House Revenue Committee last week.
Right, it's $41 billion. I don't think anyone expected a capital plan that large. It has what you call horizontal, which is roads and bridges, and also vertical, which is buildings and other sorts of state assets. So that includes not just schools, universities, we hear about that all the time, but also hospitals, affordable housing, just other things that you might not think of, but really depend on state support and have not been maintained in quite a while. So it's not just the maintenance, but also people want to attend ribbon cuttings in their districts and to open up new facilities. But here's the thing: is the governor's office proposed a bunch of new taxes in every single industry over the weekend. I'm sure plenty of lobbyists were hired to kill those individual taxes. I know of quite a few efforts that are already underway, calls being made to the governor's office saying we absolutely cannot. And so as those start to erode, so too does the actual vertical capital plan.
And there's a new push this week to try and get some action on the Reproductive Health Act that's been so controversial this spring. The bill has been tied up in the House Rules Committee, but the action in other states on heartbeat bills and so on is putting pressure on leadership to move that to the floor.
Right. The Reproductive Health Act was introduced in the winter. It's supposed to do a number of things, including take away an old law on the books that required parental notice, if I am underage, to go get an abortion. Now, the governor early on in his term had pledged that Illinois needs to be one of the most progressive states on reproductive rights. And then the speaker had allegedly stalled that by burying the bill in a rules committee, which is where bills go to die. But like you said, now with all of these states who have passed these heartbeat bills or on the precipice of doing so, there's a lot of pressure for Illinois to maintain and strengthen its reproductive rights in order to, become kind of a haven for that.
And we've got about 30 seconds left. That is a very controversial issue on both sides of the aisle here, and it's very interesting that this comes up in the final days of this session. Yes, definitely, but also not unexpected. I feel like, a crazy surprise always comes up, and, it could either be the glue that holds everything together, or it could be the straw that breaks the camel's back. We will know in the next few days. Hannah Meisel of the Daily Line, thanks very much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. Good to have you here. Coming up on the program, we're going to take a look at how senior members of the Illinois House and Senate view the last few coming days of the spring session. Lots of big issues are still kind of in a holding pattern here at the Illinois State House with just a week left before the scheduled spring adjournment. Joining me now on the program to talk more about all of that, we have the Democratic Deputy House Majority Leader Art Turner of Chicago and Assistant House Republican Leader Norine Hammond of Macomb. Good to have you both on the program.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start with the graduated income tax that moved out of the House Revenue Committee a little earlier this week, and we're hoping to see a vote on that one way or the other here very shortly. It needs 71 to have a supermajority. Democrats have 74 votes, or is anybody on the fence in your caucus?
Oh, sure. I mean, anytime you're talking about raising tax revenues or changing our tax structure here in Illinois, it's a tough vote. It's a tough vote for members. So there's been a lot of discussion around it. We understand that it's a priority for the governor's administration, and this is a big part of their agenda moving forward. So we want to be supportive, but I think it deserves a thorough debate, and that's what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks.
Now, of course, all 44 House Republicans have signed on saying no way, no how on this. So how do you? Well, I think we know how you feel about it.
And I think it brings a lot of angst for people. As Art said, when you start the discussion of raising taxes, certainly there is concern, and we have those concerns as well.
In the version that came over from the Senate a couple of weeks earlier, the actual amendment was passed with a supermajority there, but the actual brackets fell somewhat short of that. Where are you with respect to the brackets? The brackets, of course, are what actually sets the tax rates for that amendment if it actually goes on the ballot and actually is approved.
Sure. So I think that there's still a bit of discussion around what the brackets will look like and who will support that measure. But the focus right now is just getting the amendment done and having something that we can present to the voters for them to consider if we even want to change our tax structure here in Illinois. So I think that's important that we get that on the ballot and provide that opportunity for citizens to weigh in on what we're discussing here.
How will that actually be phrased? Do you have a sense of what the actual ballot measure will say to people in terms of actually implementing a graduated income tax or progressive tax?
Well, it won't speak directly at all to the rates at all. Right. It's just a very general statement that allows citizens to decide, hey, do you want to give the General Assembly the power to change the tax structure here and go to a fair tax model.
And this week, the House Republicans held, I think, the fourth news conference in so many weeks opposing the idea of a graduated income tax. As I understand it, the main part of the opposition in your caucus is if this is actually passed, it'll be a lot easier for lawmakers with a simple majority to actually continue to raise taxes once the brackets have been established.
Sure, absolutely, because there will be no rates that are actually put into the state constitution. It will just be the verbiage of a graduated or progressive income tax. So there won't be any firm rates in the Constitution, so as a result they could be changed at any time.
But isn't it also true that you can change the flat tax on as often as you want to?
True. I think the concern is certainly for us, when you look at the proposed rates now that came over from the Senate, and you look at the effect that it has on the corporates and the S-corps and the small business persons, it's a cause for pause. And in the district that I represent, which is largely agricultural, that's a real concern as well.
One of the questions that came up amongst those in the Democratic caucus about the graduated income tax was, one of the concerns was there's not enough property tax relief in this thing. And property tax relief is an ongoing outcry here at the Capitol because, as everyone knows, our property taxes in Illinois are usually right behind New Jersey in being the highest in the country because of the way we fund education or don't fund education at the state level.
No, that's true. The property tax relief is something that the governor campaigned on, and something that's very important to members of our caucus, and I think it's needed. So there'll be further discussion on coming up with a robust plan to deal with the property tax issue that we have here in Illinois, and it falls right in line with what we're doing with the progressive income tax.
That's going to be a discussion, though, that'll probably take quite a bit longer, because if you're going to actually offer meaningful tax relief at the property tax level, you're actually going to have to come up with money to fund schools at an adequate level.
Correct.
In the long run, and that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, and I believe part of the fear is, if you get the cart before the horse, you may never get the property tax relief, and that's certainly a real concern. And as you said, the property taxes in the state of Illinois are through the roof.
What about the actual budget itself? We haven't been hearing much about that, at least in the last couple of weeks or so. There was a discussion earlier, I believe in the month, that if those revenue increases in terms of sports gaming, recreational marijuana, and the like were not enacted along with some others, that we might actually be looking at a reduction budget instead of increases in areas like higher education, for example.
I think the budget discussions have been going along very well. It's been a bipartisan effort. The working groups have been working really hard on coming up with something that we can all live with. I believe it's my understanding that they're not factoring in that gaming money or any proposed marijuana money into what we're doing right now. The big April surprise of $1.5 billion, I believe, was a huge help with the budget discussions, and I believe working groups were working until late last night trying to still fine-tune what we're doing.
What are you hearing on your side?
And I'm hearing the same as well. There certainly is consensus among both chambers, I believe, both parties, that we have the funds right now to fully fund this year's budget at the expected levels, and without, as Art said, the add-ins of recreational marijuana, a bag tax, whatever that might be. We have a number of other sources that we are able to use, certainly with the April surprise, if you will, and some other entities with an MCO assessment and that kind of thing, that we're able to capitalize on our federal dollars and come up with a fully funded budget.
What about recreational marijuana? The governor and the two Democratic lead sponsors from the House and Senate came up with language a couple of weeks ago that they thought would pass, but there are concerns about the amount of marijuana that people could grow at home for personal use. That's a sticking point, and there's a big sticking point on what to do about previous criminal records regarding marijuana. Where do we stand with trying to move toward the middle on that, or are people still far apart on that?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as far apart, but it is still a work in progress at this point. The criminal justice reform aspect of the bill is very important to many members of the caucus. We'd like to make sure that there's equity in the dividing up of the revenues that will be generated from and the opportunities for generating revenue under the recreational marijuana program. It's a huge bill and a huge measure to take up, and there's still ongoing discussions. I believe an amendment may be coming out this week for us to consider, but I think the talks are going well, but it's just a tough subject to discuss.
There's the expungement issue for the Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus is a huge issue because of the fact that minority groups have suffered more convictions for marijuana busts over the years than others. But how you do it, though, is of concern to those on the GOP side of the aisle.
Certainly, and when you're looking at perhaps an ability to grow 30 grams or possess 30 grams, then would it make sense that the expungement would also mirror that 30 grams? And it's my understanding that is certainly a non-starter. And but for me and for, I would say, the majority of my caucus, there are a number of things in the bill that are questionable for us and give us pause. What
about a capital bill? That seems to be an area where both sides seem to be getting closer to being on the same page. The governor, of course, came out with his vision for what that should be, a $41.5 billion proposal over, 6 years?
Right.
What about the revenue streams that'll go into that? Hiking the gas tax, video streaming, things like that? I think we'll see what time it is right now, because they've probably changed since 8 o'clock this morning. We constantly hear those discussions. But
I would say the constant in that has always been an increase in the gas tax. At one point, there was discussions of not just increasing the gas tax, but decreasing the sales tax on that. So how we would do that and get to an agreement, I'm not quite sure.
And there seems to be willpower on both sides of the aisle.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Capital bill is something that we all get excited about. It's an opportunity to help out our neighborhoods and the state of Illinois and do some infrastructure and things that we haven't done in a while.
Representative Turner, Representative Hammond, thanks so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers.
Thank you.
Coming up, we'll take a look at how the Senate is viewing all these issues here at the Illinois State Capitol. Here with a view from the Illinois Senate, we have Democratic Assistant Majority Leader Don Harmon of Oak Park and Deputy Senate Republican Leader Dave Syverson of Rockford. Good to have you back on the program.
Glad to be here.
Gentlemen, since last week, the governor, of course, rolled out a $4.5 billion capital program for, I believe, 6 years. It's a bit different than the one that emerged from the Senate Transportation Committee a little earlier. A lot of moving parts to that thing. What do we think about it? How's it being received in the Democratic and Republican caucuses?
I think in the Democratic caucus, it's being received as a good framework, a starting point for conversations. It's easy to vote in favor of spending on projects across the state and in your district. It's a lot harder to vote to raise the revenue to pay for those expenditures. So that's where I think we're going to have to spend some time working.
Yeah, I believe that's you've already reacted to it a little earlier this week. They're asking for a lot of different revenue streams and tax and fee hikes to make this thing work.
Exactly. First, there's a misnomer. I think that we have a road program and a capital program, which are really two separate things. I think the road program, there's a lot of agreement. There's a separate revenue stream for that. So capital is taking care of all the other infrastructure needs throughout the state. And I think there's a lot of support, bipartisan support, for the capital plan. The concerns comes down, as the leader mentioned, is the revenues to pay for that. And the good news is that's where I think gaming plays a big role, because if gaming is passed and implemented, that generates a lot of revenue that eliminates the need for a lot of those more onerous, more difficult taxes to pass.
And some of those, of course, have to do with, in the governor's case, doubling the motor fuels tax is one. There's also aspects of video streaming, cable television, so on and so forth, taxing the lift services. So there are a lot of different things there. As you say, there seems to be some agreement on, if you will, the horizontal part of that, the gasoline taxes and the like. Is that a fair assumption?
I think we recognize that the gasoline tax will be a critical component of it. A question of how much and how fast remains to be determined. But it's always been the most reliable source of revenue to fund roads and bridges, and they are in dire need of repair. So I'd say the gas tax and the vehicle registration fee are the two pieces that are most certain to be part of the final solution.
And the rest of it's sort of going to have to be worked out in the next days to come, as far as where those others come in. I heard yesterday that the idea of a plastic bag tax that the governor proposed, that's probably off the table as an unpopular idea.
I think those sorts of point of sale taxes that people pay over and over again every time they're at a cash register are the ones that hit people the hardest, even if they might be the smallest.
Senator Syverson, you mentioned gaming is going to have to be a part of this. And of course, there's a couple of proposals out there. One, of course, has to do with sports betting. There's been a lot of hard work done on that in the last couple of years. A couple of proposals are out there for that. In addition to that, you've got the idea of more casinos. There are at least 5 of those, one for Rockford, Waukegan, the south suburbs, city of Chicago, Danville, and of course the Walker's Bluff one down in deep southern Illinois. How are those all interrelated?
Well, first of all, I think there's been a lot of bipartisan work, and the core gaming bill is, I think, pretty much all agreed to. Mm-hmm. The sports betting is the last component, and it is difficult because you got a lot of major players in that. And from a state standpoint, it's not a lot of revenue involved, but I appreciate the fact that the governor has really taken a hands-on lead in trying to negotiate that last piece of that to come up with an agreement. We don't want that to hold up what will be an important gaming bill that's going to help, especially now when we see Wisconsin and Indiana looking to build major casinos right on the borders against us. We need to act quickly to do that. Plus, again, it's going to generate a lot of needed revenue to help with our capital program.
And of course, a new wrinkle in this emerged in the last few days, and that's the city of Chicago, of course, is interested in a casino. And if there's going to be support from the city and the lawmakers there, they want sports betting as well. So the two are sort of interrelated.
They are, and Leader Syverson knows 10 times as much about gambling than I do, and I appreciate all the work he's done. But from an outsider's perspective, watching the negotiations one step removed, the framework is clearly there, but it's the details, and it is the infighting among all of the various stakeholders, incumbents, and new entrants that has caused so many prior gaming bills to falter.
Will the governor's leadership in this play a critical role as we count down to May 31st?
It won't happen without the governor's leadership.
And there are other, of course, revenue streams that we're talking about here at the Capitol to craft the budget for fiscal year 2020. One of those has to do with recreational marijuana. The Senate sponsor, lead sponsor on that, Senator Staines, Representative Cassidy in the House, and the governor came up with a proposal a couple of weeks ago. There has been some pushback on certain aspects of that, having to do with how much a person could grow at home for their own use, as well as expungement of criminal records. Those are two fairly significant issues. Are they going to be able to get it across the finish line? Are they going to be able to get some agreement on that?
There's clearly a path to getting it done. I think the critical issue is the equity issue. How communities who have been so negatively impacted by the war on drugs will be included in the economic opportunity presented by adult use of cannabis, and how do we deal with folks who are sitting in jail for crimes that would now be legal. And if we can't address those, I don't know how we get the bill done, but I think there is a path to getting it done before May 31st.
There had been some initial Republican support for the framework for legalizing recreational marijuana, but I've seen some of that seems to be dropping off the more the expungement question gets called into question, as well as the amount for perhaps personal use at home. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I think, again, as the leader said, we're trying to find a pathway where there can be some bipartisan support. And I think there is a solution getting to that expungement issue, what expungements, what levels, to what degree. And so those are all issues that are being negotiated. Whether that can get done in the next 10 days or not, certainly there's an effort. And Senator Heather Staines, who's been quarterbacking this, I give her a lot of credit that she's really meeting with all sides, and she's the right person to try to bring everything together. Whether that can get done in this short period of time, but there's clearly an effort to try to find a win-win that could make this work.
What about the actual framework for the 2020 budget as far as that goes? I had a couple of members, leading members from the House here a little earlier, and the opinion seemed to be that they were fairly close to having that all tied up. How's the Senate's view on that emerging? Are we pretty close to having that all tied up in a nice, happy package?
I think we're feeling really good about where we are in the budget. The fact that nobody's talking about it, we're talking about all the other issues right now, gives credit to all the hard work that's gone in, both among the member negotiators and our staff, putting together a framework that will put us in position to pass a balanced budget before May 31st without any drama.
Without any drama in this place?
Well, I think also because of because of the Trump windfall that generated such significant amounts of new revenue, that made this budget process a lot easier this year, because it took the pension issue, which was very controversial, off the table. So that helps. Plus, we've got the new Medicaid assessment, which is generating a key revenue to deal with some of our medical concerns. So I think a lot of things fell into place to make this budget process work a lot easier this year.
I want to go back to the graduated income tax for just a moment. That passed out of the Senate on a party line vote there. It's in the House. It's out of the House Revenue Committee, about to go to the floor. And one of the things that is a if you will, negotiating point at this point is how much property tax relief might actually be a part of that final package. And that's always been one of the things that anytime taxes are talked about, general taxes being raised, comes up at the Capitol. It's trying to get our heads around doing something significant with property taxes. Will that be part of the final package? You were one of the lead sponsors of the bill.
I hope that it will, and I hope that it will be meaningful. The problem is we're trying to close a $3.5 billion structural deficit, and any property tax relief has to come on top of that. And in order for it to be meaningful, it would require a pretty significant increase in the income tax. And I don't know how we thread that needle. We want to make sure it's a component, but our first priority is to put the state on sound fiscal footing.
Senator Harmon, Senator Syverson, thanks so much for your time on Illinois Lawmakers. Always appreciated.
Thank you.
We will be back next week as the clock ticks toward adjournment on May 31st with another edition of Illinois Lawmakers.